Guess who's on campus today? It's Steve Ballmer.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor over with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Lars, this is something you and I talked about a couple of months ago. As you know, spring practice has kind of become a who's going to be on campus today. And the first thing I see when I walk in the door, you got in a couple minutes after I did, is a huddle of three human beings. I'm like, oh, what's going on over there? And it's Jedd Fisch, it's Pete Carroll, and it's Steve Ballmer, the Microsoft CEO, who is the sixth richest man in the world. And this is something we've talked about at length on this show on previous episodes. If Steve Ballmer wants to get involved with University of Washington athletics and donate some of his extremely vast fortune, that would be an extremely helpful just cause to UW as a whole.
Yeah, not to correct you, he is the former owner or former CEO of Microsoft. Either way, but either way, still a very important. Again, also owns the Clippers, which honestly probably should be in Seattle. Who knows? Maybe we're bringing back an NBA team. But no, it really does point to that the substance of bringing influential people around. Now, again, mostly you want it to be football, right? Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, Jack Del Rio, all those guys that, right, John Lynch, exactly, where so many of those guys that he's brought around. That's one side of the equation, but the other is what your life is after football, right? Don't make a 4-year commitment, make a 40-year commitment, something Chris Peterson used to say. Jedd Fisch, I'm assuming, will still use part of that because the University of Washington is an academic cell. No matter whether Jedd Fisch wants to emphasize just the NFL or not, there is obviously that academic piece to it. And the connections that you can have with NIL around Seattle, where you have Amazon, you have the American Heart Association, which the team did this past weekend. There's so many things that are around Seattle, and Microsoft is one of them. And I think Softy mentioned this, where have you ever recalled Steve Ballmer coming to a game and or public practice in his time in our, I mean, I can't recall it ever happening.
Definitely not.
Every now and then I know Jimmy Lake, mentioned Microsoft and other big businesses when the NIL thing was kicking off when he was the head coach. But there was never that personal connection. So whatever the connection is, whatever the relationship is, the fact that Jedd is having him at practice, obviously it's not just for marketing, but it also kind of does say, hey, look, you never know who might show up on campus.
Yeah, UW posted something on social media just before we press record saying that Steve Ballmer was talking to the team, that he's getting involved, that he's doing things. And so obviously the next, just probably the biggest step is finding a way to get him to become a donor. And it's a big, bold step. I know we know what we're saying when we say this, but it's something that shouldn't necessarily be that much of a stretch for somebody who we just said is one of the top 10 richest people in the world, and somebody who spent a lot of time here in Seattle. Yes, he owns the Clippers, who played in a playoff game. I was recording this on Monday night, played in a playoff game on Sunday, comes up to Seattle on Monday. I mean, yeah, when you're a billionaire, you're able to do that sort of thing. But this is the kind of thing where, if he's out there, he likes talking to Jedd. He likes what he sees from what practices, even though he didn't stick around for the entire practice. I'm sure he has a lot of things on his plate. But that's something when you look at that and you just say, if this guy wants to get involved and even just say, yeah, here's $10 million every now and again, because that's just a drop in the bucket for this guy. And we're not saying that's something that's going to happen. Who knows? We'll see if that's, a route that ends up happening. But because he's on campus, because we're seeing these things, they have to be noted and they have to be talked about. If they happen or not. That's a whole different story. But because this is something we're seeing, and we're seeing Jedd Fisch take time out of his day to go talk to Steve Ballmer, and Steve Ballmer is willing to come up to Seattle and visit practice, that's really noteworthy. That's really important for, especially, in this era of NIL where, for the time being, still anything goes. Trying to get that guy involved is hugely important.
One thing to remember about Ballmer, he does have a bunch of other businesses, right? He was obviously the former CEO of Microsoft and the Clippers and things like that, but he's got the Ballmer Group. There's a number of other foundations that he's a part of. And one thing that Motley Futures has kind of emphasized is those nonprofit organizations, obviously the American Heart Association, important companies, right? Not just like small time, whatever, but companies that everybody knows, hey, the Boys and Girls Club, same example, right? Where Ballmer could easily say, you know what, I want some of your players to help promote some of my nonprofits. There you go. So it's not necessarily, oh, this Ballmer guy with millions and billions and billions of dollars can help UW. Well, he's probably not going to drop a B note or even
definitely not.
But let's say Ballmer drops.
I was going to ask him to do that for me personally, though. Like I was going to say, like, hey man, if you got anything just like sitting around, that'd be much appreciated.
You drop your wallet and I find it and I return it for you. Is there a finder's fee involved with that? Again, I don't want to ask. I'm just kind of assuming you're probably good for it. But
exactly.
It still gets back to the overall point of, again, we're not saying that Ballmer is going to drop 10, 20, but any kind of involvement that he can have in the marketability that he has with his experience in Microsoft and the Clippers, that's what you're aiming for, right? You're not bringing Steve Ballmer out to practice to say, hey, Steve, we kind of need like 5-10 million in the NIL coffers. You think you can help us out? We know you're good for it. It's no. What can we do to help you? And what can you do to help us? It's more of a partnership, because that's really what Jedd Fisch is selling with the NFL. It's a partnership between the NFL and NFL teams drafting Washington players. Look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where the number of Huskies that are in Tampa Bay now is ridiculous. And the same can be said for a couple of other teams. It's a partnership. And that's what you're getting with Steve Ballmer. That's why people want to get in business with Steve Ballmer, because he has such a wealth of experience, not just a wealth in money, right? Everybody wants to, get in the pocket of Steve Ballmer, but they don't necessarily have the same vision that Steve does. And so pairing that vision clearly, and that's what Jedd is selling, a vision, his vision for the Washington program, his vision for the University of Washington, and what that pairing can bring. That's why you bring Steve Ballmer out to practice.
Absolutely. And I feel one thing that I want to note real fast when it comes to that selling relationships piece of it is we talked to linebackers coach Robert Balla after practice today. And one of the first things that he said in that same vein of relationships, which was really cool to hear, especially just, as you mentioned all that and just what it all looks like, is somebody asked how he got involved with Washington and everything like that. And so, it's kind of a guy who knows a guy. And the example that he gave was just, I coached under Nick Saban last year, and he reached out to Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick put in a good word for it. He was, oh, hold on a second. Like that was really cool to see. And it's exactly as you're saying. That's kind of where it is. It's just that relationship building and, going both ways sort of thing, which is really cool. And Lars, with that being said, it was Washington's, I know I got the graphic list here, is Washington's final spring practice, because Wednesday will be a walkthrough as we lead up to the spring game on Friday. So let's get into the actual practice. Right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time. With killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets, which would be fantastic. If you're somewhere where there's a team in the playoffs, you want to make sure you can go see it. There's no better place to find last minute deals than on Game Time, where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy theaters, and so much more. They've got zone deals where you can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. And with seat views, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You can take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And before we move on, we also got to give a shout out to our good friends over at FanDuel, because it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet it on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Sportsbook and, the update everybody's waiting for, a small Celtics update. Good to see them take a 3-1 series lead over the Miami Heat. Although Kristaps Porzingis did leave early with calf tightness, Jason Tatum looked like he rolled an ankle. So hopefully both those guys are okay, because I would still be betting really heavily on the Celtics making a deep run in the NBA playoffs, probably making it all the way to the NBA finals. And you can do all that on FanDuel. So, Lars, another fun practice. One of the things that you and I were talking about before we hit record was the unfortunate decision for DeMarcus Davis to transfer. I only mean unfortunate as, Washington has 2 scholarship quarterbacks. We both really, really like what we had seen from him in terms of what the upside is, where there were still a couple of things he needed to work through in terms of mechanics, in terms of just accuracy, some small things that are certainly correctable, but things that he definitely had a little bit of ways to improve on, unlike Damon Williams, where we watched Damon Williams today, and it was just all that more apparent why DeMarcus Davis decided to look elsewhere, because he had a fantastic day.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was not the 11 on 11 passes that really impressed me. It was his ability to zip the ball, which is something I've talked about a lot this spring on the show. No doubt he's got the arm, but he fit it through such a tight window. And I know I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but it looked like the potential of what some, not all, right? Because Mike was completely different, but what some of those tight Michael Penix throws look like, where he's fitting it between 2 defenders, where he hit a couple of second and third teamers in the back of the end zone for back-to-back touchdowns on a 7-on-7 period. And to me, the ball just comes out so alive from his arm. It just flies right off. Whether it's 30, 40, 50, 10, 20, it doesn't matter how far it's going. His deep ball is so real that it's just a matter of, can he get the range? Can he find the timing? And that's why, again, it's not a bad thing if Damon doesn't start, because this season is going to be prepping Damon for being a starter likely next season, which is why DeMarcus is kind of in his best interest to go look elsewhere, have a fresh start. Because even if DeMarcus were to progress like we think he would, Damon's still going to have that much of a leg up. So when we saw that today, where even with, again, a second team and kind of a mix of a second and third team, with obviously not a ton of scholarship guys on the line, still made it work, still scrambled for a little bit. But clearly you can see the coaches want him to scramble, but still find a way to throw and not just scramble every time, because clearly if he wanted to run the Johnny Manziel offense, he would go absolutely berserk. It'd be like a video game. It'd be unfair. But in Jedd Fisch's offense, it's still pass first, get the ball out, find the open receiver, which, again, to me, one thing that is going to happen a lot this season is that swing route to Jonah Coleman. Like that, that is going to be the route. That is going to be the go route of this offense. It just seems like that's how it's been.
So I hear you going with that one. I was thinking about some of the things that I saw today in a little bit of a different light, because I was talking with our good buddy Ben Glassmeyer, who writes over at Huskies Wire. We were having a conversation where he was talking about the offensive line and how he was a little bit concerned about Damon's development in terms of, would he get happy feet in the pocket? Would he decide to tuck and run? And I disagreed with him, where I said, no, I really don't think that's what's going to happen here, because the more I look at him and the more that I watch just what we've seen from him this spring, doesn't matter if the pocket's breaking down, if he has a clean pocket, he's done a really, really good job of getting through his progressions. And another thing that we've talked about, in a non-Austin Mack way, where I feel it's a fair comparison to draw, where they're in very, very different skill sets, like between those two guys. But in terms of what they were able to do after enrolling early and in their first stretch of practices, what we saw from Austin versus what we saw from DeMarcus versus what we're seeing from Damon, it was all very, very different. But with Austin, it was, I'm going to sit here, and I'm going to make my reads, and I'm going to sit, and I'm going to wait, and I'm going to sit, and I'm going to wait. And with Damon, we see a really, really good job of, when the pocket breaks down, he knows how to move around, but he doesn't just put his eyes on the ground and just say, all right, I'm taking off. His eyes don't come down, just say, I need to run the ball. He does a really good job of staying poised and staying composed and saying, I know what to do. I know what to do with the ball. I know what I'm supposed to do in terms of looking for a receiver. And if this isn't open, or if that's not open, or if my guys aren't looking at me, then I'm going to take off, and then I'm going to go. And that's one of the reasons that he does have so much of a leg up, but when DeMarcus was still around, between those two, because that's just so advanced for like a college quarterback as a whole, truly, but especially for somebody who is an early enrollee true freshman. It's so impressive to see those things. And just the more I watch him, the more it's, this guy looks like he's going to be around for a good long time.
And that's why Will Rogers is the perfect quarterback to bridge that gap, where Will Rogers has such a vast experience, mostly playing in an air raid under Mike Leach, but he has that ability to teach Damon, hey, here's just how to see the field in this offense, kind of be more of a floor general, but don't limit yourself because, again, the skills you have are way different than Will Rogers. So Will's not going to say, hey, and it's bad to run. It's like, no, just, again, if it's not there, go for it. But usually there's a way to find it. And honestly, if you're Damon, you don't want to be running as much because it takes more energy out. If you're able to just, buy a little like half second in the pocket and wait that extra second and third read to have somebody get open, it's better just to flip that in there than to actually run and potentially take a hit. It's not that that's a bad thing for him to do that every now and then and make those runs that we've seen him do. But I think pairing those two together, it's why the offense is going to look very different this year than it did last year, and it's going to look very different next year than it will this year because they're all three different types of quarterbacks, but it's still the same general concept. And that's why when you look at Damon when he was at Basha, he ran his offense, but he's clearly also a student of the game. He's been around a number of other quarterbacks. He's had experiences where he could be around some high-level quarterbacks. And so when you pair all of that together, this is the perfect bridge scenario where you come in, you have a veteran quarterback and Will Rogers, who, again, one thing to consider that as we say all this and as you were saying that, it's like, when you said, well, when the pocket breaks down, it's like, well, when does the pocket not break down this spring? Let's call a spade, right? But that's also because the lines that are in the spring right now are not going to be what they're in the fall, and the guys that are redshirt freshmen and true freshmen playing right now are going to be much better next year as a result in terms of when they go in 25. When it comes to spring ball next year, they're going to be way ahead because of these reps. Guys like Michael Watkins, guys like Paki Finau, who are not bad right now. They're just certainly not up to speed as, let's say, what the 22 line was, because saying the 23 line is just unfair. But what the 22 line is, where Roger Rosengarten's coming in with a little bit of experience, but not a ton, but a lot of potential, right? Think about Zach Henning, right? Where, you'll probably play him this year, but really 25 is going to be his year to really shine and pop and have that first big growth season. And then you hope he comes back in 26, graduates, or goes early or does whatever he wants to do. Sure. There's that progression where you're going into the portal to still supplement some of these guys, where you're not going to try and push some of these guys away because they're younger. You just don't want to rush them in because that's going to look a lot more clunky than what Jedd Fisch wants the offense to look like, especially.
So when I think, because you made a lot of really great points right there. When I think about the offensive line, it's the only comparison that I can think of is not 23, it's not 22, it's 2015. When I think about it, I think about 2015 when he had two true freshman tackles in Trey Adams and Caleb McGarry. Or Caleb McGarry is a redshirt freshman that year. But it's not the same in that sense where, they're big, super physical guys, where I think, one guy who reminds me more in that same mold is Justin Hilkema, where he's just got that same body type, that same just absolutely massive frame, where Drew Azzopardi has that as well. And I'm not saying that, like we look at Kelly Tafai, or we look at, because Kelly Tafai's got a really, really nice frame as well. And so does Sione Fasolo, so does Elijah Chiquette, so does a lot of these guys, but it's not necessarily, especially with the latter two that I just mentioned, it's not nearly as filled out. But that's kind of where, there's a chance like, okay, maybe it ends up looking like this, where you're comfortable starting a freshman there because of XYZ. But, as we kind of get into the final days of the transfer portal here, where we're probably going to see announcements trickle in through May 1st, through May 2nd, where you can file paperwork on the 30th, but you might not hear about it till closer to the end of the week. We'll see what that looks like. We're definitely going to be talking about that a lot more over the next couple of weeks. But once some of these guys get in the door, and once, we probably get to what Jedd Fisch said, like the middle May, getting a little closer to the end of May, maybe, where we get to some of these dates and we know exactly what the roster is going to look like, then we can start to have a more solidified conversation about the offensive line. And it's something, when I think about it in terms of demand, we're going to see him this year. He's not going to do it an old school red shirt where he's not going to step on the field for a single snap. That's not going to happen. We're going to see him at multiple points. And my biggest questions are exactly as you said, Lars. What is the line going to look like in front of him? And there's still a long way to go but there's promise there. There's talent there. It's just a matter of getting more experience under their belts and getting some more experienced guys in the door for this year. And then it can all be full go next year when you think about the line, when you think about the quarterbacks, when you think about some of the younger skill guys where, I'm assuming we're going to see one more year of Denzel Boston, even though he'd be draft eligible this year. And it's a lot of things like that where there are a lot of things to build on for a 2025 season. And as you said, it's all about kind of bridging to that. And you can still go 8-4 this year, where that's certainly in the realm of possibilities when you look at the schedule. It's just a matter of making sure the trenches are there, because I think every other piece is there outside of just making sure the lines are solidified. And let's get into more of that, but we got to take a quick break real fast. And we got to give a shout out to our good friends over at Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much more to get. You can get unique stickers. You can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the board with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton and include their own unique mini games, which is super cool, where you can dig for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, game on. So, Lars, it's all about bridging, as we said, in a certain sense, to getting to 2025. And one guy who we've been super high on, who made a couple of nice plays today, is Rashid Williams. And that's one of those guys who long-term looks to be a nice building block for this team.
Exactly. That's why you bring in a couple of transfers, just so those guys can still get first-team reps in the spring. And I'm sure Rashid will certainly get playing time this fall, right? It's not a matter of will he not get playing time or will he? It's just how much. And I think when you look at what this offense has been doing this spring, look how much reps Rashid Williams has been getting with Damon Williams, right? Where there's a lot of, shall we say, banked reps coming into 25. Now, if he's going to get some reps with him on the field in 24, that's just a bonus. Because I agree with you so wholeheartedly that Damon's going to get. My question is, does he get over 4? But that is for a separate art. That's for a separate show. Because again, at minimum it's 4. I don't think he should get between. I think he'll get 2, obviously, in the first couple of weeks. But regardless of how much time he gets and how many games he plays, that relationship, building that in practice, is going to be honestly more invaluable than what those potential game reps could be, because it's going to be in the fourth quarter. It's going to be against third and fourth stringers, and it's going to be against FCS and lower level competition. So with that being said, you're not going to gain a ton from that. It's still important to get game reps, but more importantly, it's getting these 15, 14 plus the spring game. Well, 13 plus the walkthrough in a spring game, practice reps under their belt together, so that, and that's also why you get him with Will Rogers, right? Because Rashid is going to play probably with Will at some point this year, right? Now it's a matter of, can he, break into that starting role? Probably not, but he's certainly, again, just like Damon, it's going to be a competition when he goes into fall camp. Will Rogers is probably going to win it, but no doubt all of their play with the 2 quarterbacks and the receivers has allowed them to say, you know what, when we get to fall camp, we have an idea of who we want to start, but we're going to let you guys sort that out, versus saying, Rashid, we don't want to push you just yet. Because clearly that's not the case with his coaching staff. Clearly, if you can play and you're a freshman or a redshirt freshman or even true sophomore, you are certainly going to play, if not start, as long as your position dictates it.
Absolutely. And so in that same vein, another guy we need to talk about is Adam Mohammed, where he caught a little touchdown today during one of the 11-on-11 periods. And he's somebody in that same mold where he's been working as the RB2 a lot this spring. And as we talked to Scotty Graham last week, he's not afraid to tell you how much he likes Adam Mohammed. And it's something where the more I watch him, he might be the guy where the more I look at it, that he might, if I had to choose any one member of the early enrollees to burn their red shirt, it might be him right now, where, when it comes to Demond, yeah, there's as you said, it's a whole different conversation, especially if they end up bringing in like a junior college transfer, just another scholarship quarterback, just to see what that ends up looking like, maybe to try to save him to get that extra year. But when I look at Adam Mohammed, it's just a physical freak, for lack of a better term, because he's such a good athlete. He's so filled out already. And as Scotty Graham said, he just turned 18. When he gets up to 220, it's going to be a whole different conversation. It's also really good to know that that's what the goal is. And, as we were standing on the sideline looking at our dates, wait, he's not 220 already? Because he's just absolutely massive as it is right now. So when you look at not only just the physicality that he provides, but the speed, the change of direction, the pass catching ability, the improvement as a pass blocker too. Like, those are all things that are really, really important for this offense. And Jonah Coleman, we know how good he is. We know what Cameron Davis can be when he's healthy. So by no means is he going to supplant either of those guys. But as we saw in the national championship game, you need to have a steady stable of running backs. And obviously, that plan took a bit of a turn in the preseason when Cam Davis went down, but there was still not that third option where Adam Mohammed can be that perfect third option, where he's really good. He does all the things that you ask, and it's very clear that he's not there yet. Like, it's because he's a true freshman. So he's not going to be what he is now in a year and a half, 2 years, but you can still see all that upside. You can see all those just physical traits that are very promising when it comes to success moving forward. So that's another guy where the more I watch him, the more I say, okay, I think this is going to be one of those building blocks of the team.
He's very projectable, and I think that's what you look for. And it seems like that seems to be the buzzword. It's really the buzzword of football, but especially with this coaching staff, when you ask Scotty Graham, were you surprised? No. Whether that's true necessarily or not, so be it. But he saw the projectability. He saw what Adam Mohammed could become. And Adam Mohammed wasn't some, heralded 4-star, which we may or may not touch on. But either way, that Scotty Graham could also be able to pull in. So with that being said, having those bodies stacked in the room is the important thing, because, and it gets back to my other point, you want those banked reps in the spring and even in fall camp, potentially in those first 3 to 5 practices of fall camp before you truly get into install and preparing for the season, so that when the time comes for Mohammed or Audric Harris, for example, the receiver, any of these guys that are true freshmen, the moment doesn't become too big. They feel up to speed because they have these bank reps in their pocket. Now, if they don't have the bank reps in their pocket, then now you're walking through next spring. Hey, Adam, now you're going to probably be the guy or one of the guys. Oh, well, now I got to pretend like I'm the guy now, or think like I'm the guy. Whereas he's thinking that right now. That's just kind of how he thinks. That's how he's wired. That's how, and the one thing that you were basically alluding to was all of the traits that these guys have are just a little bit different, but they all share some commonality where they can do some of the similar things, but they all need to pass block, obviously, certainly. But they each see the game and approach the game in just slightly different ways, that when they get into their full build and to your point, kind of start to fill out into their frame, that's when you start to see the true production. But getting those guys in as freshmen is better than, oh, well, now 2 years from now, we're going to need to find another Dylan Johnson. No. I'm not saying Dylan Johnson and Adam Mohammed are going to be one and the same, but just he can get bigger. And that's the important thing. When you look at Adam Mohammed, it's like, oh, he's big, but is he maxed out? Can he add it? Is he going to slow down? I don't think he's going to slow down in the slightest when he adds another 5 to 10 to 15 pounds on that frame. Sure. Because when I think about it, it's a name that I think I mentioned to you at practice, Richard Newton, where he came in as a freshman. And it's like, oh, you could kind of see what they're thinking. And then he has a year in the weight program, and it's like, oh, now I see what you guys were thinking. And that's exactly the end game for Adam Mohammed and some of these other guys that Scotty Graham is going to be bringing into the position where you can be a little smaller looking. Again, he's by no means small, but you can be more slender looking, knowing that by the time we really need you to be doing 10 to 12 to 15 carries a game, you're going to be a little more bulked up, because I don't think anybody's going to get more than 20 per game. I mean, Jonah Coleman might.
I don't think it's going to even get that far.
I don't think exactly.
And with that being said, I feel like we got to focus on the defense for at least a minute or two here. And you can kind of see some of those same players on the edge. And the one I really want to highlight is somebody who we hadn't really seen practice in a little while, but I'm really interested in Isaiah Ward. where it's the same thing, where he's definitely a little bit on the leaner side right now, but as he continues to bulk up and just go through the program, he's somebody who's got the size, he's got the athleticism, he's got all the talent. And in a somewhat deep room of edge rushers right now, where they're all at the same level of none of them have started an extended amount and done anything to really put themselves over the top. He's somebody who I'm keeping an eye on in that same vein, where if he continues to grow and add weight and add strength, that's going to be really important in a room where, we could see 6, 7, maybe even 8 guys, depending on what it looks like. And I know that's a little extreme, but we could see that many guys hit the field because they're all at the same level of experience. So why not give them all a shot and just kind of see what happens?
It's funny that you say that and say, oh, I know it sounds crazy to think you might have 7 deep. You know who was originally the first UW coach that told me recently after practice that they want to be 7 deep at every defensive line position?
Please.
Josh LaPoy.
Oh.
So, but again, now that was under the Steve
That's a deep cut.
But it is a deep cut, but it takes me back. And the reason we bring it full circle is what the NFL level, you have 3, 4, 5, 6, potentially with a practice squad guy or 2, 7 guys at each position. That's the NFL model. That's why you stack these bodies in where Russell Davis, Isaiah Ward may not play as much as they will in 25 and 24, but all these guys are going to get in the rotation and you're going to let them sort it out where who steps up the most. If Zach Durfee dominates the way we think he's going to, how does that affect Jacob Lane? I don't think it affects it as much because they're both versatile in their own way. So stacking and staggering these bodies is exactly how you build out an NFL program, and Jedd's doing that at Washington.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the Everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We've got so much more fun stuff coming for you from the spring game, from the transfer portal, recruiting, all of that. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel to do content every single day. So please make sure to like the video. Click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. And if you got any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.